Good morning. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study. My name is Kurt. I'm your host. I'm a non-believer, but I study the Bible and other religious texts in order that I can know more and not suffer my disbelief for want of knowledge. Not disbelieve in ignorance, but to either believe or disbelieve on basis for cause. So I do struggle to keep an open mind. It is a struggle because I pretty much made up my mind, but it's not because I made up my mind because of obstinance, because I'm obstinate or angry at God, or I don't believe God exists, so I can't be really angry at something I don't think exists. It's my, if anything, I've made up my mind simply because continued, ongoing, year after year, decade after decade of sometimes casual, sometimes quite robust inquiry has revealed no good reason to think that God exists. Of any God, let alone the God of the Hebrews, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So I continue studying, again, not so much probably anymore to be convinced, but just so that I understand, and so I can make good arguments against, because I do think it's a worthwhile, a very worthwhile and good use of time to fight this nonsense, which causes people to live their lives believing that there is some sanctuary beyond death where they can escape and where they don't have to face the real challenges of a universe without apparent meaning. The real apparent fact of that circumstance that we find ourselves existing in. And they may in a way squander this one life on a vain gamble and a fearful that'd be a fearful, what is the word, retreat into a fantasy. So let's get on with it. This is Exodus 11. This continues where Exodus 10 stopped. Exodus 10, of course, being two plagues going on there. The plague of the locust and the plague of the darkness. We're nearing the end. There's just one plague remaining. So, and I thought that this chapter would begin that plague, but it doesn't. This is kind of a segue chapter between the 9th and the 10th plagues. In this chapter, and it took me several readings just to pick this up, where this was taking place and to whom it was taking place. I thought it was just kind of, like I said, a segue chapter of information about the state of things and the circumstance of what is to come between the plague of darkness and the plague of the firstborn. But now I realize after several readings that this situation in which this chapter occurs is while Moses is still standing in the audience of Pharaoh when Pharaoh tells him, "Leave now and never see my face again." The reason that came about was I was confused because in Exodus 11 we have Moses addressing Pharaoh, and I think, wait, did he go back? And then I realized by rereading Exodus 10, the end of Exodus 10, that Moses had not yet withdrawn, so he's still standing there. So imagine this scene. Pharaoh tells Moses, get away now, and know that if you ever see my face again, that's the day you'll die. And that's the end of the chapter. And then the next chapter, 11, is Moses. As a little bit of information, we're being told that God had previously told Moses about the final plague, the plague of the firstborn. He'd given Moses all the details, saying basically that around midnight I will, and he says it's like it says God coming in the shape of the destroyer. Although the destroyer is not yet mentioned. I will come, and I will kill every firstborn of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh down to the firstborn of the slave girl at her millstone. And that didn't, but let me finish that. And then I will not touch any Israelite. Not a dog will raise its bark against any one of the Israelites. Now back up for a minute. I didn't catch it again. It's we're reading it repeatedly, and by multiple versions helps out. I didn't catch it first, the slave girl thing. But then I was like, wait a minute, what slave girl? Aren't the Israelites the slaves? And then I remembered that, oh yeah, there are other slaves too. Other slaves from other peoples. And so why then would God be killing the slaves, the firstborn of other slaves? And I looked into it, and I read that, actually this is Rashi commentary, the Jewish scholarship, and he said that basically the slaves of the firstborn of the other slaves would be killed for two reasons. One, because the slaves of Egypt, these other slaves, these non-Hebrew slaves, somehow were also enslaving the Israelites. I don't know how that works, but I'll just have to trust Rashi on that one. So they were guilty by the virtue of that. And also, this is the more insidious one, we don't want those other slaves to be spared, the families of those slaves to be spared, lest they then attribute their protection not to Yahweh, but to the deities that they worship, the heathen, the pagan, whatever the heck deities, not Yahweh gods. So he's a jealous God. We don't want anybody else saying, hey, my God protected me, and when it was really, Yahweh that did the protecting. So Yahweh did not protect them. And they suffered too, even though they were slaves there in Egypt, not of their own volition. So we know now that in the first little paragraph there, that first part of chapter 11, that God had already had this chat with Moses and told him what was going to happen. So Moses now recounts this to Pharaoh, and he does so with, you can almost sense the increasing anger. Well, not really, you can't sense it there. You get it at the end, because Moses withdraws in a huff, clearly quite upset. And we know then that his anger was building, and Rashi tells us that his anger was building because Pharaoh had said that you won't see my face yet again unless you die. So if that's what caused it, then his anger must have been building. So anyway, so picture the scene. Moses is standing before Pharaoh. Aaron is probably there as well. They're holding their staves and they've got their robes. Pharaoh just told them, get away from me. If you ever see my face again, that will be the last day of your life. And Moses, kind of upset, he says, well, I got one last thing to say. That is, soon after midnight, our God will come through Egypt, and the firstborn of every, I missed something, I'll go back, of every Egyptian household, from the man or beast, so the animals too, wow, are going to be killed. And the reason that they did that, according to, was it Rashi who said that? I think so. The reason that they had to kill the beast was because the Egyptians worshipped their livestock, and so Yahweh's, twisting the knife was not only to kill the firstborn of the Egyptians, but to also kill the gods that they worshipped. It would be like, punishing Indian, folks from India by killing their cows, right, which they worship. So there's that. So Moses leaves with a final threat. He gets the last word after Pharaoh threatens to kill Moses if he appears again, and then he walks out in a huff. But I forgot something. I forgot that Moses had been instructed by God to tell the people of Israel to ask of the Egyptians And at one point I think it said they're neighbors or they're friends. I think in the Jewish version it calls them friends. In the King James and NIV versions of the Bible it calls them neighbors, or just the Egyptians. It asked them for gold and silver. And we know that God will make the Egyptians favorably disposed to the... Oh, we know it because we read it in this chapter. Favorably disposed to the Israelites, so that they will give them the requested gold and silver. Huh. So that's quite a how do you do, huh? First you ask your captors for their goods, and they give them to you, and then you come around in the night and kill their firstborn, and then they're going to let you go and just not slaughter you wholesale. Interesting. But apparently that's what happens. That guy's got a gun. I've seen him a couple of times. He must be a police officer. But he's riding along with his motorcycle and he's carrying a pistol at his side. Interesting. And that's the end of chapter 11. There's not much more to it. What comes after that, of course, then with the next chapter will be the plague of the firstborn, which will then end our plagues. And I think that's it. There was really not a lot of scholarly research associated with this one. You know, my Bible is a really good one. It comes with some good stuff. The Jewish Chabad.org site that I use has good stuff as well. And I find stuff on my own just searching Google. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining me. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time for more Freeway Bible Study. Bye-bye. Make it a good life.